Good morning, LIBOR members. We'll just wait a minute. Have you all come in? And we'll just get started. Welcome, everybody. My name is Marlo Paventi-Diltz. I am the Senior Director of Public Policy and Government Affairs here for the Long Island Board of Realtors. And I'm joined by some of our members of leadership here. We have Melissa Gomez. She is our 2022 Government Affairs Queens Chair. With her is her Vice Chair, Hind Hatoum. And we're also joined by our President-elect, Kevin Loiacono, and our Suffolk VP, Gina Marie Bettenhauser. And of course, we're here, the star of our show today, Queensborough President Donovan Richards. Just to tell you a little bit about him, he is a lifelong resident of Southeast Queens and has represented his district on the New York City Council from 2013 to 2020. He was elected to his current seat, which is Queensborough President, in November of 2020. As a fighter for affordable housing, he was proud to serve as chair of the Subcommittee on Zoning and Franchisees during his first city council term. He used this position to fight for rezoning in the Rockaways to increase residential availability as well as commercial and community space. He also served as chair of the Committee on Environmental Protection following Superstorm Sandy. Through his position, he was able to help secure funding for flood protection to protect the Rockaway communities. As Queensborough President, Donovan has led the efforts to revitalize our great borough to make one which works for all of its residents and workers. And we know, Queensborough President Richards, you are an advocate for your residents. We know that because we had the pleasure of working with you and your staff this past fall during the very unfortunate storm that we had in Hurricane Ida. We were pleased to work with your office in the efforts to help revitalize some of those communities in Queens. And I just want to thank you. And our members want to thank you for everything that you've done for them. So thank you. So Melissa, do you just want to jump right in it?
Oh, yes. Thank you thank you for all the years you've actually committed to public service. I'm based in like South Queens, so your name is very well known, obviously. I can't tell you how many city council members reference you as a mentor. So it's honestly an honor to have you here to speak with us. What I would love if you could please be able to do would be to explain more about your role or your duties as Queensborough President, because this is a new position realistically from your prior positions and stuff like that.
All righty, so I'll start and thank you. And first I want to thank all of you for your assistance, Marlo, Kevin, all of you for being helpful to us during this trying time, especially coming out of this storm. And we count you as friends, and want to thank you for your partnership. And the way I define when people ask me, what does the borough president do? I sort of allude to the fact that I'm both the defender and the cheerleader of the borough. It's a big job. It's a really big borough, 2.4 million people. Obviously, I have purview over land use. So while my recommendations are not binding, the city council has the final say so in land use development projects. My recommendations are very important, and I'm happy to say we've probably approved, I think, a little bit north of 3,000 units since I've been the borough president, and that's only been a year coming out of 4.5 elections. I have appointees on like over 100 boards, so from cultural institutions to bids, to the library system, to the pension system, to the education system. I have mayoral appointees as well that I'm able to put on, so that sums that up a little bit. And then, I'm tasked with also distributing capital funding and expense funding, so supporting nonprofit organizations is something we do. Most proud to have brought in $70 million in capital funding this year through my budget in Queens. And really what I did is really invested in many of the things that are important to the borough, whether it's education, some development projects, actually. We're going to supplement, for instance, a great project we're doing with Hannock and Astoria, where we're going to build out a community center and hundreds of units of affordable housing. So we look for those unique opportunities to also provide some subsidy in rare cases, not in all cases, but wherever we see 100% affordable development projects, we try to be helpful if there's a need for Reso A. Schools, hospitals was a big thing this year because obviously we were the epicenter. So really, I wanted to really center investments and make sure that our hospitals were taken care of, and we invested a little bit north of $12 million there this year. Parks and libraries. So all of the things that make Queens what it is, and any ways that we can strengthen the borough in terms of that capacity coming out of this pandemic is important. My job is also to advocate. We have a real key opportunity working with Senator Schumer and our congressional delegation as the infrastructure bill comes down the pipeline. And as we see the Build Back Better bill come down the pipeline, I'm actually about to go meet State Comptroller Tom DiNapoli when I leave you to talk about the needs of Flushing. And really these snapshots give us an opportunity to advocate for those dollars. And we have a unique story to tell. Unfortunate that we lost nearly 10,000 residents to this pandemic. And in honor of them, we need to make sure that we're pushing to make sure wherever we see deficiencies and inadequacies, we need to ensure that that support is happening. Small businesses is something, so I really working to collectively on private-public partnerships is important. So for instance, we were able to work with the owner of the New York Mets, Steve Cohen, and the Alexandria Foundation. And many of our small businesses were crippled during this pandemic. We were able to secure close to $17 million from them to distribute in grant funds to, not loans, but grants to small businesses and to street vendors, and over 799 businesses benefited from that. And then, we have, I'll be joining the governor again twice this week. We've had some great announcements when it comes to our airports. And we know that our airports are the gateway into this country. So just this Monday, we announced a $9.5 billion revamp for Terminal 1 at JFK. And today we'll be doing a groundbreaking at Terminal 4, which is the Delta Terminal. And then, we have some great news. We talk about advocacy. JetBlue wanted to leave our borough. Could you believe that, for Florida? And my job was to keep them grounded in Queens. And we were able to secure that working with the Port Authority. And we'll be breaking ground on a new terminal, or they'll be closing in the first quarter next month, then in the new year to redevelop that terminal. So jobs, workforce development, housing, we have a large immigrant population here. We founded the first immigrant welcome center in the city. Actually, it's probably in the state. So that's something that is centered in my office because we understand that our diversity is our strength in Queens. We have over 200 countries represented, over 350 languages and dialects. So really it's about ensuring that we're meeting the needs of the people where they're at. So it's a big job. That sums it up very briefly, but every day is different. Every day is different. But once again, I view this as a vehicle to defend and both advocate for the borough.
So you're definitely, in your history, your public history, you've been a very strong advocate for affordable housing and zoning for residential, commercial, and commercial real estate. We appreciate that. What are ways that we can work with your office in 2022 to try to help bring more affordable housing, basically, to happen, or things that need to be addressed for our citizens here in Queens?
So yeah, we've had some the last few weeks have really been, and sort of when you look at the residential market and where it's picked up across the city, Queens has actually hit pre-pandemic levels when it comes to picking up where we were before coming out of this pandemic. We're still in it, obviously. But ways we can work collectively together. One, I always like to start with the emphasis on community. So if there are sites that, any of you identify for upzoning, it's very important to start that dialogue with us in the community. The earlier, the better, because we want to be able to, advocate and hear from the community in a real way on what those specific needs are. And obviously every community is tailored a little differently. But what I find is most communities want the same things. You know, they want to see not just housing, they want to see commercial development, they want to see community services or community space wrapped into it, and park and open space. So that's something as different as each corner of this borough is, I find collectively, you know, we all want the same things. So it's really about that communication early. You know, one of the things I want to advocate for moving into my official term now is really pushing the community boards to look at corridors across the borough, to identify some specific sites so it starts ground up rather than the city government coming to them and saying, we want to upzone this. No, we need to make sure that community boards and local communities are also a part of the conversation. So that's something that we're looking to do, and members should certainly stay in touch with us on that. Community land trust in terms of home ownership is going to be a model that I think you should look towards moving into the future. The Rockaways will probably have the first community land trust enacted, and that's a form of keeping affordable home ownership centered across the city. It's something that is rare nowadays for the city to talk about. We're actually in the middle of an RFEI in the Rockaways on creating what we call a community land trust, in which we'll probably have a little bit north, close to 100 new homes built, but built in a way that also enables local residents to tap into those prospects. So that's something to look for. And then, you know, the other thing, which is not so tailored towards housing, is infrastructure. And as you alluded to, I want to thank LIBOR for being so helpful to us during this time of need. You know, if you identify places, or you're out there and you're a real estate agent and you see places that are in need of infrastructure, you know, you should let our office know, flag those areas so that we can make sure we're advocating for those specific areas as well. Infrastructure is so important. You know, we were able to secure $2 billion. I just signed off on a big acquisition project that's going to happen, for instance, in Rosedale off of Hook Creek Boulevard, which is going to be close to about a $52 million project. We'll be also breaking ground on Brookville Triangle. So we really tried to center a lot of the locations that historically have flooded in Queens to prioritize those for infrastructure investment. And like I said, with the Biden administration signing of this infrastructure package, you know, we'll be advocating with our congressional delegation. I'll be joining Congresswoman Grace Ming next week, for instance, in Flushing, to talk about the need for some of those dollars to reach there, which is good for everybody. It's a win-win.
That's amazing. That's awesome. Another question. Queens is such a unique borough. We have literally everybody here. You have major developers in parts of Queens, but then there's a majority of Queens is just your regular homeowner, regular person, you know, that type of thing. There's a huge difference between how our property taxes are compared to, let's say, other boroughs. For example, Brooklyn and the Bronx. You could have a $2 million property in Brooklyn that's taxed for $3,000, whereas a $2 million property in Queens is going to be taxed for $15,000 or $18,000, realistically speaking. What can be done to try, you know, what can you do, and what can be done in general as well to try to curb that? Because that's a huge affordability issue for people that are purchasing in Queens.
Trust me, I'm a homeowner. I definitely understand.
Yes.
Jesus, it made me misrent it.
And you pay more taxes than the $3 million brownstone
exactly,
in Brooklyn.
Exactly. And this is one of the reasons I actually sued the de Blasio administration. So back in my time in the city council, there were about 6 of us who actually joined the Real Estate Board of New York. And it was like a strange coalition, because it was like the real estate board along with like advocacy groups who are always on the opposite side of REBNY. But one thing we all recognize is that, yes, you know, the tax system is so unfair and unjust. And, you know, I think about Southeast Queens and communities of color that actually incur this more than any other communities.
Absolutely.
So I actually was part of pushing. I was part of a coalition of folks. You know, it's a broad question. One, the way properties are assessed needs to be looked at. You know, the Department of Finance is not doing assessments, and as you alluded to, you know, you could live next door to someone and end up paying like $3,000 more in taxes than them on the same block. So just looking at it from that standpoint, we also have to work with the state. And this is something that our new mayor has discussed, but quite frankly, there needs to be political will. We need to get the governor, because the city of New York cannot fix this issue alone. We need state legislation as well to fix this issue. So this has to be a collective issue that both state and city say they're going to work collectively on to fix the unfair burdens that are placed on some homeowners. So it's the question is political will, but we certainly, this is something at the top of my agenda to speak to both the governor and the mayor on. There were some hearings held, for instance, by the Property Tax Commission, which my community came out, and many corners around Queens came out to talk about this same issue. So we look forward to seeing what their recommendations are going to be, even though this administration is leaving now. I think they sort of, the de Blasio administration has kicked this can down the road to the next administration. So we'll be watching this closely.
Thank you. And then I'm actually going to introduce Hin. She's my co-chair, and she has a question for you that has to deal with co-ops.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you so much again for being with us. It's an honor to have you this morning with us. As our borough president, you've been an advocate, as you stated, with the home ownership and so forth. So we've been trying to push along the co-op bill. So we'd like to know what other tools or opportunities that you think we should move to help move forward this bill, because it has become an accessibility issue, a fair housing issue, and an affordability issue.
And I lived in Laurelton Gardens Co-op for some time, and that's what enabled my wife and I to save up to also buy a home, especially when we had our son, who now just turned 6. So I am actively working on the J51 tax abatement stuff now. My office just testified sent in some testimony to the city council, and just this Monday we released a statement with the Glen Oaks Co-op, which we've been working with that coalition very closely to try to get the council to pass this tax abatement, this J51 tax abatement. I was the sponsor of it when I was in the city council last year, and it got renewed. So we are working collectively to try to push this rock up the hill. Obviously, the council has their last stated today, so I have not looked at the agenda yet to see if it made it on, but we did advocate for them to push if this is what you're talking about, the J51 tax abatement bill today. If not, this is something we'll take up with Eric when he comes in, and I know he'll be sensitive to it. So I feel relatively good about where we would be with him if this administration wanted to kick the can down the road, which seems like it's happening a lot.
Yeah, I'm actually going to explain a little bit more what legislation she's talking about.
Okay.
We've been trying to push a legislation that will ask co-ops to schedule interviews within a certain period of time, because some co-ops are great to work with.
Oh, no, they're not. Oh, yeah.
And then there's others that that we look at it as a fair housing.
Yep. Okay, you're talking about the fair housing aspect. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'm surprised.
And
I think Brad Lando was I forgot who carried this bill when I was in the council, but I definitely agree with you.
It's gone mute, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's gone mute. So this is something, once again, we'll probably have to revisit under the next administration. And, what sort of gives me confidence that we can get somewhere is that you got a young crop of council members who, they care about these issues deeper than, I'm not saying that there's not a commitment by council members now, but a lot of these members coming in, they're not homeowners. They're going to be looking to buy a co-op. For some of them, this is the first time, they'll have a solid job to an extent in some cases too. So just from their experience, I'm confident that we'll get somewhere with this legislation. But yes, I'm a firm believer of that. I've heard the horror stories of, not even getting a response in some cases when you go for an interview, or some of those discriminatory practices, or not being scheduled based on what you look like or where you come from.
Yes.
So I am, whatever ways I can be a partner in advocating for this bill, please count on me.
Well, I think it's great what you had said. It's a testament to also a piece that Hin touched on. it's an affordability. You said that
Yep.
you lived in a co-op so that
Yep.
you could save up for your first home.
Yep.
So I think that's testimony enough that maybe we might ask you to speak on when we're doing our
Oh,
advocacy
absolutely.
piece.
Count on me
Awesome.
to do that. And I actually carried I've carried fair housing legislation with the speaker of the council before I left. So this is an issue that's like near and dear to me, and you could count on me to be an advocate on this issue.
Awesome. Well, listen, we know you have a busy day and you've got lots of things to do, but again, thank you so much for joining us today. You said a lot of words that really caught my attention: assessments, building of corridors, land trust, small business. These are all of the issues that we care about as well. And I think that, you know, one of the things, if we can impress upon you about our association, is that realtors are more than just people selling and buying houses. They're advocates. And the people in this room this morning are some of the best advocates that we have on hand. So please utilize us in the future as you do your work as resources, because
Yeah.
I think that we can give lots of insight and feedback about things from our perspective that maybe not thought of before. And I think that we have a lot to offer to you. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Right. No, and I want to thank you because, you know, during my time in the council, you know, we would often get calls, as you can imagine,
Sure.
on housing issues. And, you know, we would be able to call, you know, some realtors in really emergency situations who, you know, there's this perception that, oh, every realtor's a billionaire and millionaire and everybody gets lumped in. But really, you know, realtors come from our communities. I have a good friend of mine's in my neighborhood, David Lucas. You know, when I was looking for something, like, he was the guy I called, you know, I mean, so, you know, so I definitely understand, you know, the nuances around this, and, you know, want you to know that you can count on us to be a friend. And we need to be able to also have those tough dialogues when we need to be able to talk to each other, hear each other, see each other, so that we can understand where we're coming from. But I will say that realtors have really been helpful, especially for residents who are in a crunch, who might have been facing an eviction crisis, or, you know, I mean, so I definitely count on many of you to be friends, and I look forward to the continued relationship moving forward.
Wonderful. Thank you. And thank you for
Kathy.
fostering a great team. Your office is a pleasure to work with. So
Yes, I'm so lucky.
yes.
You
All right. Well, thank you again for joining us. We hope that you stay safe and have a great day and a great holiday season.
You too.
Thank you
God
so
bless.
much.
Stay safe. Take care. Already.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.